Hey everyone, this is Louis7, and today I want to take a look at all 7 of the Lord of the Rings Online's expansions and basically rank them from my favorite to least favorite. This is of course before the Gundabad expansion, which will be coming later this year as LOTRO's 8th expansion pack. And also to point out, I am going to be excluding the War of Three Peaks, which was called a mini expansion. Also, before we move on, I do want to mention I have a LOTRO points giveaway going on in this video, and there will be more details on that later. I also do want to give my brief background with my experience with the expansions, and first off, I did not start playing LOTRO until a few months into Siege of Mirkwood shortly before free-to-play was launched, and I also only first reached the level cap in Rise of Isengard. With all future expansions from that point, I was a part of the launch and kind of the level cap experience there. For both Moria and Mirkwood, I only experienced these expansions while leveling and basically when going back and doing the content at later times when there were of course like balance changes, character progression changes, itemization changes, and all that sort of stuff. So my experience with those is a little bit more limited to just point that out. This also does bring a good point that I will factor both the original expansion launch experience when I do have that and my current kind of back in time type thoughts on the expansions. And chronologically, for those unfamiliar with LOTRO's expansions, we first had Mines of Moria, then Siege of Mirkwood, Rise of Isengard, Rise of Rohan, and finally Helm's Deep. Those were the first 5 expansions, but then there was a large gap till the 6th one, which was Mordor, and then finally there was another pretty big gap until we saw the 7th expansion, Minas Morgul. But anyway, now it is time for me to actually rank the expansions that I like best, and coming in at number 7, which while that is a nice number, it does mean the worst expansion for me, and perhaps as many of y'all could guess, it is going to be Helm's Deep. Now before I go just like complaining about Helm's Deep saying why I don't like it, I actually do want to point out there are some ideas of the expansion I like, and the first is the class trait system and that whole revamp that went with it. While I think there are some problems now that just haven't been addressed since the original changes way back many years ago, I actually like the new trait system compared to the old one. This is coming from the perspective of somebody who started with World of Warcraft and its talent system, and I really like that they could like put points, trait points in LOTRO into what you want with the traits and they give various boosts. It just gives a sense of, I guess, character and importantly class progression as you level up and get more of these points. Again, while it has issues now, I really like the idea behind it and having some more emphasis on what your character does in their role outside of, say, the primary role of the class, actually splitting it up into multiple roles with these specs. Also with Helm's Deep, I really like the world building for the most part. There are some areas there I'm not a big fan of the world building, but I actually think there are some really great sites within the zone and some really nice areas, and actually some of the towns and scenes give me like this huge appeal of actually living there and living the quest there, that type of experience. Even though the questing there, as we'll get to, is boring to me, the world building really makes me have that sense of really wanting to enjoy it and actually be there, basically. Also will point out the cosmetics and even the crafted cosmetics with the guild system there. I actually like the cosmetics, they're pretty decent. But to get to the problems of the expansion and why it is my least favorite, what matters most with this, I think, is the content, and that is what I don't like at all with Helm's Deep. So first of all, epic battles. They were kind of the new endgame system, although I consider there to be a huge lack of endgame with Helm's Deep. They were just no fun at all to start, and now I will say they are okay-ish to me at best. Sometimes I can enjoy doing epic battles, but usually after I do a few, I just don't want to do them for a long period of time afterwards. But anyway, with the epic battles, the biggest problem to me is they basically completely negated your class. Your class, your character did not matter. What mattered completely is the new progression system in epic battles. I think it just took away too much from the core MMO and class-based gameplay that LOTRO has with that. And also because of the epic battles, there was this lack of regular instance content, raids and the such, and it just felt like there was a lack of actual endgame content at the time. Now moving on, the questing is the other big part of the expansion I don't like, and there are many ways I could describe, I feel like, the questing here, how bad it is to me, and overall, I just find it to be really slow to kind of slog through. It takes forever to do the questing there, which you could say is a good thing because that means there's tons of content, but it's just so slow progressing. I feel like it just takes forever the whole time and will never finish. And One of the ways it is slow is there's a ton of back and forth that seems very unnecessary, even from a storytelling standpoint. It just seems like way too much back and forth that is unnecessary. And on that note, with the story though, it never felt like there was actually a story that was built upon while you were questing. Even though this is actually something I know other players really like the story there, I just could not get a sense of the story because there was so much back and forth and it took so slow to actually do anything in the game from a gameplay experience. Also with the questing, it was very linear and every step required like full completion of previous steps, and that is something I don't like that design philosophy at all in MMOs, and it's something I really did not like about Helm's Deep, basically because you couldn't jump in at a certain point or skip certain points if you don't like them. I feel like this is a kind of design philosophy that has plagued LOTRO ever since the start of Helm's Deep. It really started with this expansion, and I do not like that, and it has continued even to this day. Going forward with that feeling very required for you to do every single quest basically in an expansion era or a new zone to actually get the progression that you need in that zone. And again, with the no jumping in and skipping, I don't really like that part. So yeah, that is basically why I dislike Helm's Deep and why it is my least favorite expansion, but perhaps to some people's surprise, this was actually a bit hard to choose because I again actually overall like the new trait system that came with the revamp compared to the old trait system, and that was a significant long-term change from the expansion that I do to this day enjoy. But next up, we actually have another tough decision for me. This is going to be Riders of Rohan. So this is actually a bit tough to justify Riders of Rohan being ahead of Helm's Deep and being number 6 instead of number 7. But the main reason why is I felt like there is actual endgame content unlike Helm's Deep, because Riders of Rohan had the new instance cluster with what I thought was a fun single boss raids. Actually, there were 3 single boss raids that I thought were fun, and a fun set of 3-mans and a 6-man instance Bells of Dale. Otherwise, I will say I did not like mounted combat much, and I'm still not a fan of it. The questing there, I think the way I would describe it is just meh. That's kind of how I overall feel about it. I have a lot more fun in other areas of LOTRO, but there are still some parts of Riders of Rohan that I can enjoy, and comparing to Helm's Deep specifically, I can have a lot more fun with the Riders of Rohan repeatable dailies and even the hype bold reputation stuff and things like that, but again, still overall a lot less fun than other areas of LOTRO. But why Riders of Rohan is where it is mainly because of mounted combat and the initial lack of content and what I felt like was too much of an emphasis on hype bowl. Those are the main reasons that I find Riders of Rohan to be worse than Mordor, which will be number 5 on my list here. So Mordor is a conflicting and annoying expansion to me, is just the simplest way to put it. I feel like by this point the amount of fun in the questing experience took big steps forward, yet at the same time when I actually go to play through the quests in Mordor, it just isn't that fun to me. In fact, Mordor might actually be my least played expansion as far as like doing a full quest playthrough goes, because I just didn't even find it interesting enough, let alone fun enough to actually continue the questing after the first little bit. I also, with Mordor, was not and still not am a fan of the Light of Verendil system. I just don't like that type of gating, that type of thing, and I really think the Light of Verendil held back the questing from being even more fun to me. But having said all this about disliking the Mordor questing, I will admit there are a few times I have visited Mordor in the past couple years well after that initial launch of the expansion where I have found places that can be quite enjoyable, some quest camps, some areas where it can be fun. And this is basically why Mordor is ahead of Helm's Deep and Riders of Rohan. The questing is still more enjoyable, I think, than those 2 previous expansions, and my overall experience with the expansion and its content is better. There's also no mounted combat, which is a big bonus compared to the 2 Rohan expansions. But I do have one positive note to end on with Mordor, which is the featured instances, which I still was having a lot of fun with, even with Mordor, and Mordor did continue to have outside of featured instances. It had regular endgame content with instances, raids, and the such with that. And the last thing I want to say about Mordor is I will be adventuring there soon, and I am very interested to see how I will actually think of Mordor re-experiencing the content on Anor, because I do plan to actually give it a more fair playthrough this time to see if I enjoy it more. Like, I have a suspicion, it's a weird suspicion, but I have a suspicion that I will actually enjoy Mordor more than I initially did. So we will see if that actually pans out in the future, and when I can give an updated video like this, maybe after Gundabad, we will see how Mordor ranks with that experience in mind. But at this point, we have covered basically all the expansions that I am not really a fan of, and with the last 4, we can move on to better times, just like you could have better times with 500 LOTRO points. So recently, my channel achieved 7,777 subscribers, which is quite the achievement and a great number. So to celebrate that, I am giving away a few sets of LOTRO points codes. For this video, to enter the giveaway, there are 2 things you need to do, and the first is comment your least favorite expansion, kind of just like I went over my least favorite expansions. And I am curious, just a very brief reason why. It doesn't really have to be detailed, I'm just curious what people think. And I will have more details on the second part of the comment later, so stay tuned for that. But anyway, we can go ahead and move to my better times with Mines of Moria at number 4. And right away, I actually do have to say that I hate rating Moria this poorly because I actually love a lot of the content there nowadays. But that's also the problem because my initial experience in Moria was absolutely terrible. While I have some nostalgia-like fun thinking back to dying a bunch to little goblins in Moria and all that, it just wasn't super fun to me back then. I also fell to my death a bunch, and a bunch more times at that. So Moria was so bad for me that I actually avoided it like the plague when I was starting to get like alts to that level. For example, on my hunter, I got my legendary items and just grinded skirmishes actually to avoid going to Moria, and I jumped to Lothlorien at something like level 56, and I will point out that this was back in the day when that was actually super slow for leveling, but I did that because I did not like Moria and just wanted to avoid it. But with all that, I actually nowadays do love Moria. The questing there is honestly quite fun to me, and I really enjoy the instances as well, all the group content there. Those are all super fun to me, and whenever I actually do get the chance, I try to run these instances with on-level groups. Even the simple Filical raid, also known as the Turtle, that is oddly super fun and actually was my very first raid experience in LOTRO, even if it was a little bit over-leveled. So I quite enjoy all of that nowadays with Moria. There is still one bad thing though, even to this day with me in Moria, and that is the book quests. And basically, I think they are overall just super boring. Not every single quest, but overall the book quests there are super boring, and I think they're about the same level of Helm's Deep boring, which is saying something for me. But what is not that boring is number 3 on my list, which is Siege of Mirkwood. And okay, actually there was a tiny bit of boring in Mirkwood, and that is, once again, the book quest, but more specifically the book quest with Mazog. They were just kind of annoying and felt way drawn out. I know it's like the whole Lord of the Rings story dealing with that, even though I'm not too familiar with that, but it just was super annoying. Mazog was getting super annoying in that storyline, and I wanted to be done with it like a very long time ago before we even got close to Mirkwood. And outside of that though, I will say I really did enjoy Mirkwood, and that includes everything from the quest to instances. But there are 2 important notes I have for this expansion, and one is I started after Radiance was removed. I never got to experience the Radiance system, but it sounds like something I would not have liked at all, kind of like Light of Rindle with Mordor. I just don't like that type of gating, and instead am a fan of more like baseline difficulty. The second note I have is on Inadwaith. While nowadays Inadwaith and its raid are separate from the Mirkwood expansion, I still consider it a part of like the Mirkwood expansion experience and the leveling experience with that, especially for my early on days in LOTRO. It's kind of the same thing with Lothlorien, the Great River, Wildermore, and places like that, and it's kind of, once again, coming from somebody who initially started with WoW before LOTRO, kind of the way the expansion cycle works. But anyway, briefly on Inadwaith, it is just one of my favorite zones in the entire game, so of course this was a huge boost to my Mirkwood experience throughout the years of LOTRO. But even outside of Inadwaith, with the Mirkwood part of Siege of Mirkwood, this was the most immersed I ever felt in the game when I got there. The spooky forest really lived up to that description, and it really was just an engaging quest experience. Even to this day, I enjoy questing there a lot. But what I also really enjoy are the instances. Kind of like Moria, I love the Mirkwood instances especially. The big highlight to me is actually the Barad Guldur raid, which is super fun, and I'm super happy that it scales so we can run it on level, over leveled. But that's enough about Mirkwood because we have 2 more expansions to get to, and the 2 options left are Rise of Isengard and Minas Morgul. And it will be the latter for number 2. Surprisingly, LOTRO's most recent expansion is one of my favorite expansions. I think Minas Morgul took the direction Mordor went with the game that helped make it like a number 5 pick for me and significantly improved on it. Minas Morgul's questing experience is super fun with both the Mordor Besieged and the Morgul Vale zones. While I was admittedly a bit late getting to it, I also found the endgame instances in Raid to be quite fun as well. I really like the new system of being able to scale group size with instances and them being tied more into the questing and story experience as well. While I do think some improvements could be made, the endgame progression systems have also improved a lot since Mordor to me. I still prefer the focus on gear rather than essences from some of the older expansions, but I still take the improvements as being a positive for this expansion with the gearing, that is. And overall, honestly, there just isn't too much negative for me to say about Minas Morgul, which is why it is ranked so highly, and I think the best way for me to summarize my thoughts is to just, again, it seemed like it took what Mordor was trying to do, but did it a lot better and fixed up a lot of the shortcomings, all while feeling like a more focused expansion pack. And I really just hope, looking forward, that Gundabad continues this trend of improvement that not only Minas Morgul brought, but that LOTRO in general has had the past couple years. So yeah, not too much on Minas Morgul, but that does finally bring us to the number 1 LOTRO expansion in my opinion, but before that, what about your opinion? So if you're interested in that LOTRO points giveaway that I mentioned, the second thing I want you to comment is your favorite expansion, and once again, just a brief reason why. And I will pick a random comment in about 1 week from when this video is uploaded, and I will announce the winner in the next top 7 video, where there will be another LOTRO points giveaway, but it'll be a little bit different format. But anyway, to get to my number 1 expansion in LOTRO, that is the only one left, which is Rise of Isengard, and that was the level 75 cap for those unfamiliar. But anyway, Isengard holds a special place in my heart because it was the first expansion that I got to the level cap, and it is what really set me on my LOTRO path for years to come. Perhaps it's also the reason I thought so poorly of actually LOTRO's content for a few years after it, just because it set my standards too high. While I don't remember all the aspects of the endgame reward systems, I do remember enjoying the progression experience that it provided. And as far as the actual content of the expansion goes, I thought and still think the instances, including the raids, were quite fun. And speaking of fun, this is exactly what I thought about the questing as well. Even the story was quite engaging to me throughout the entire expansion cycle's content, which, by the way, just like with Mirkwood and Enedwaith, I think that it does include the Great River, which I thought was great on its own, but I will say by the time I got to the level cap, that zone was either near release or just released. I honestly don't really remember, but what I will say is I just really enjoyed the in-game experience provided in Limelight Gorge, as well as just the Great River Zone in general. But basically, Rise of Isengard was just good times all around for me with LOTRO. And the reason it is the number 1 expansion for me is not only because of that, with it being some of the most fun I've had in the game, but also because it really did cement like my LOTRO journey moving forward towards today. And beyond today, I am looking forward to the Gundabad expansion and future expansions after that, hopefully. But Gundabad is going to be coming later this year, and I really hope that it will fit into one of my favorites. I'm thinking with Gundabad in the mix, I could do a video ranking of the eras of LOTRO, which would include some non-expansion times such as Shadows of Angmar, Gondor, Ered Mithrin, and eras such as that were more quest pack between the expansions, those type of things, along with, of course, Gundabad, because we will have that update by then. But as far as the list today goes, overall, I do have to say making a tier list would actually be a lot easier for me. Mainly because numbers like 7, 6, and 5, they would all easily just fit into the lowest tier, and I wouldn't have to actually think which is worse. But I would also probably have just one middle tier for kind of the middle expansions that I ranked today, and then a top 2. But either way, I feel like there is a mix of old and new spread throughout the rankings, but I will say 3 of my top 4 were the first 3 expansions of LOTRO. There was just a rough patch in the middle, essentially, from basically Rohan through Mordor. Anyway, that is all I have for this video on ranking LOTRO's 7 expansions, and I hope you all enjoyed hearing my thoughts on them. As usual, I am interested in what you all think of my list and what you all think of the expansion, so please comment your thoughts, and I also do appreciate anyone who enters the LOTRO points giveaway, which, by the way, for that, I will choose the winner before the next top 7 video, as I mentioned, where I will announce the winner, and I will choose randomly the winner next week from when this video is uploaded. And stay tuned for details on how to get LOTRO points in the next top 7 video. But anyway, that is it for this video for real, and I hope you all enjoyed it and maybe learned a bit about LOTRO's expansions, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing for more, or becoming a channel member to support the content, and thanks for watching everyone.